On the 20th of September 2013, the sound of 4 Rolls-Royce Conway engines echoed across the skies above Britain for the final time. At RAF Bryce Norton, aviation enthusiasts gathered to witness the last operational flight of a machine that represented one of the most ambitious chapters in British aerospace history. It was the Vickers VC10. During the golden age of jet travel, the world remembered names like the Boeing 707 and the Douglas DC-8. They became symbols of the jet age, carrying millions across oceans and transforming global aviation forever. The VC-10 followed a very different path. Only 54 aircraft were ever built. It never dominated international airports, never achieved the commercial success of its American rivals, and slowly disappeared from public memory. Yet this forgotten British jet accomplished something extraordinary. While many aircraft from its generation vanished decades earlier, the VC-10 continued serving through Cold War operations, conflicts in the Middle East, and military missions deep into the 21st century. It was not the biggest airliner. It was not the best-selling. But hidden behind its limited production numbers was a question that still fascinates aviation historians today. How did a commercial aircraft considered a market failure survive longer than many of the legends that overshadowed it? To understand why the VC-10 existed, we have to return to the uncertain years after the Second World War. Britain had emerged victorious, but its aviation industry was facing a difficult reality. During the war, British factories had focused heavily on fighters and bombers, while the United States had developed enormous experience building long-range transport aircraft. By the 1950s, American manufacturers were beginning to take control of the commercial aviation market. Boeing had the 707, Douglas had the DC-8. Both aircraft were designed for a new world of high-capacity international travel, especially the profitable routes crossing the Atlantic Ocean. Britain needed an answer. One early attempt was the Vickers V1000, a promising long-range aircraft planned for both military transport and civilian airline service. But the project became heavier, more expensive, and increasingly dependent on engines that were not ready. In 1955, government defense cuts ended military support, and without enough confidence from airlines, the program collapsed. For Vickers, it was a devastating setback, but a new opportunity appeared from an unexpected problem. BOAC, Britain's international airline, had started ordering Boeing 707s. On paper, the American jet was powerful and successful. But BOAC's network was not built only around perfect airports in Europe and North America. Many of its most important routes connected Britain with destinations across Africa, the Middle East, and Asia. Places like Kano, Nairobi, and Karachi created a different challenge. Hot temperatures, high-altitude airports, and shorter runways reduced aircraft performance. A fully loaded jet needed enough power and lift to operate safely in these demanding conditions. The Boeing 707 was excellent on major international routes, but BOAC wanted something designed specifically for the difficult parts of its remaining global network. In 1957, under the leadership of Sir George Edwards, Vickers proposed a completely different approach. Instead of trying to beat the Americans by building a bigger aircraft, they would build a smarter one. The result would become the VC-10, a jet designed not for the easiest airports in the world, but for the hardest ones. From a distance, the VC-10 looked like another 4-engine jet from the early 1960s. But beneath its elegant shape was a completely different engineering philosophy. While Boeing and Douglas focused on maximum passenger capacity and long-distance efficiency, Vickers designed the VC-10 around one goal: performance under difficult conditions. The most obvious difference was the engine arrangement. Instead of placing the engines under the wings like the Boeing 707 and Douglas DC-8, Vickers mounted 4 Rolls-Royce Conway turbofan engines at the rear of the fuselage. This decision transformed the aircraft. With the engines removed from the wings, engineers could create a cleaner aerodynamic surface optimized for lift. The VC-10 received a large, high-performance wing equipped with advanced Fowler flaps and full-span leading-edge slats, allowing it to generate more lift at lower speeds. The result was an aircraft capable of taking off from shorter runways and operating from airports where many other long-range jets struggled. The rear engine layout also created another advantage passengers immediately noticed: silence. With the engines positioned far behind the cabin, travelers experienced a much quieter flight compared with many early jetliners. At a time when jet travel was still loud and unfamiliar, the VC-10 offered a level of comfort that became one of its most admired qualities. But Vickers had to make compromises. The standard VC-10 carried around 135 passengers in a two-class layout, noticeably fewer than larger versions of the Boeing 707. Its design was optimized for routes of roughly 4,000 miles rather than simply maximizing capacity. Later, Vickers developed the Super VC-10, stretching the fuselage by about 13 feet and improving performance with upgraded Conway engines to compete on longer international routes. It could cruise at approximately Mach 0.87, making it one of the fastest subsonic airliners of its generation. Every engineering choice had a purpose. The VC-10 was not designed to win a numbers race. It was designed to take passengers into places where other jets faced their greatest limitations, and soon, those decisions would be tested far beyond ordinary airline service. By the way, if you're into stories like this, subscribing takes 2 seconds, and there's a lot more coming. When the VC-10 entered commercial service with BOAC on the 29th of April 1964, flying from London to Lagos, it finally had the chance to prove whether Vickers' unusual design philosophy worked outside the engineering office. And almost immediately, passengers noticed something different. The VC-10 was not simply another jet airliner. Its rear-mounted engines created one of the quietest cabins of its generation. Passengers who were used to the noise and vibration of early jet aircraft often described the VC-10 experience as smoother and more refined than many of its competitors. For pilots, the aircraft earned respect for a different reason: control. The same wing design created for difficult airports gave the VC-10 impressive handling characteristics, especially at low speeds. Its powerful Conway engines and high-lift systems allowed it to operate confidently from challenging locations across Africa, Asia, and the Middle East. The environments that exposed the weaknesses of other aircraft became the places where the VC-10 showed its greatest strength. But airlines judged aircraft by economics, not emotion. The VC-10's greatest engineering advantages also created its commercial limitations. Its smaller passenger capacity meant higher operating costs per seat compared with larger American aircraft. As airports improved around the world and long runways became more common, the specialized problem it was built to solve slowly disappeared. The aircraft designed for difficult routes entered a world that was rapidly eliminating those difficulties. Yet the story of the VC-10 was far from finished. The Royal Air Force saw value where commercial airlines saw limitations. Its strong structure, powerful performance, and long-range capability made it an ideal military aircraft. Converted into transports and later aerial refueling tankers, the VC-10 began a second life that would last far longer than anyone expected. During the 1991 Gulf War, VC-10 tankers supported British combat aircraft by extending their range through air-to-air refueling missions. It later served during operations in Kosovo, Afghanistan, and Iraq. A design created for the remains of Britain's old air routes had become a critical tool in modern military operations. And on the 29th of November, 1979, the aircraft proved its speed as well. A British Airways Super VC-10 crossed from New York JFK to Prestwick, Scotland in just 5 hours and 1 minute, setting a remarkable subsonic transatlantic record for its era. The VC-10 had failed to conquer the airline market, but it had proven something else. A great aircraft is not always measured by how many are built. Sometimes, it is measured by how long the world refuses to let it disappear. By the time aviation entered a new era, the world around the VC-10 had changed. The aircraft had been created for a very specific mission: carrying passengers into demanding airports where heat, altitude, and runway limitations challenged ordinary jetliners. But the commercial aviation industry moved in a different direction. Airports expanded. Runways became longer. Airlines became increasingly focused on one measurement above everything else: operating cost. New wide-body aircraft offered greater passenger capacity and better fuel efficiency. Aircraft like the Boeing 747 transformed long-distance travel by carrying hundreds of passengers at a lower cost per seat, while later generations of more efficient aircraft pushed older four-engine jets toward retirement. The VC-10's greatest advantage had slowly become less important. Production ended in 1970 after only 54 aircraft had been built. On paper, it looked like a commercial disappointment. But history would judge the aircraft differently. Many airliners are designed around the needs of airlines. The VC-10 was designed around the challenges of the environment itself. That philosophy limited its market, but it also created a machine with exceptional strength, performance, and adaptability. Those qualities allowed it to survive for nearly half a century. Long after most passengers had forgotten the name Vickers, RAF crews were still depending on the VC-10 for global transport and aerial refueling missions. The aircraft continued flying until September 2013, almost 50 years after entering service. Today, surviving examples remain preserved in museums, reminders of a time when engineering solutions were built for specific problems rather than mass-market success. The VC-10 never became the most famous jet of its generation. It never matched the sales numbers of the Boeing 707 or Douglas DC-8, but perhaps that was never the real measure of its achievement. Because aviation history is not only written by the aircraft that sold the most, it is also written by the machines that solved problems nobody else could. The VC-10 was not forgotten because it failed. It was forgotten because it was built for a world that disappeared. And for the world it was created to serve, it was almost perfect. If this story was worth your time, hit like and subscribe and drop what you think in the comments.